Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Dave Opton speaking, and no matter where you're joining us from, both Don and I are very pleased and delighted that you've taken some time from your day to join us for today's call. And we're going to kind of get into this in very short order here. I just wanted to, particularly for those of you who have not had an opportunity to participate in one of these before, I just want to take a minute here to kind of go over the format of how this works. Even though we are online, as you can see with the slide up there that has Don's contact information as well as my own, this is not a webinar in the sense that most of us have become accustomed to webinars these days. In other words, neither Don nor I have come with any kind of prepared PowerPoint or anything like that. This is essentially kind of like a conference call, frankly, where the agenda is set by those of you who've decided to join us today. Don and I are simply here as resources. We'll try to pool whatever experiences that we bring to try to address any issues that you would like us to talk about. So the agenda really is created by the questions that you have for us, and it can be on anything that you that you wish. And we'll certainly do our best to, if not answer them specifically, certainly I can assure you that one or both of us will have an opinion about whatever it is that you've asked us to comment on. So, and the way you do it, pretty straightforward. If you look over there to the right, you will see a section, I think it says to chat or questions. Anyway, it's pretty obvious that it's a message kind of a board area. Type in your question. We'll be able to see it. Nobody else will be able to see it, but I will be. So don't be worried about confidentiality or anything like that. We certainly don't use names or anything. It's really the subject matter that's important. So whatever it is that's on your mind, just pop it in there, and Don and I will do our best to get to as many of those as we can in the time that we have. So don't hold back. Just sort of feel free. And for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Don's background, as you can see from the slide here, he is the Chief Business and Development Officer for ExecuNet, but he's got a background that covers an awful lot more territory than just that. He is, for example, prior to joining ExecuNet, he founded and spent more than 17 years as the CEO of Rainmaker Associates, a performance improvement consulting, coaching, training, and executive search firm headquartered up in Exeter, New Hampshire, and he still resides in New Hampshire. So with almost 15 years of executive recruiting experience and many more years as a senior executive and hiring manager in both education, government, and industry, he has, and very rightfully so, become a recognized expert in that area, along with personal branding, marketing, networking, and interviewing. One of the reasons I always am delighted when he can find the time to join me on these calls is because of the rich background that he brings. He understands the career management arena from both sides, not just the candidate side, but obviously the recruiting side as well. Prior to Rainmaker, Don was a two-time Chief Operating Officer and three-time Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing. He was also the Undersecretary of Human Services for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as well as a high school principal. His educational background, he's a graduate of SUNY Albany with a BS degree in business and also holds a master's in counseling as well. So, and I could go on, but I won't, except to say, Don, welcome. Thanks for joining me again.
You're very welcome, Dave.
And okay, so again, for those of you who might have come in just a minute or so later, let me just emphasize again that this is kind of a Q&A session. It's a chance for you to ask questions on whatever aspect of kind of career issues or whatever else you'd like us to comment on. We're more than happy to do that. just type them in as you see over there on the right, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. So, Don, I thought before we get to the first question here, since we're about coming up on halfway through the year, and in the clients that you're working with, and I know you're in the marketplace every day and seeing and observing how things go on, any particular comments that you might want to share with the group in terms of how you think things are going thus far this year?
Well, I think the good news for those on the call is that folks are getting more interviews than they did a year or 2 or 3 ago. There are obviously then more jobs. We know that looking at job reports that get posted, we know more people are getting hired. And we continue to see that our membership is made up largely of folks who are currently employed and looking to make a move rather than those who might be unemployed and looking to make a move. So the good news overall is that one's chances of finding a new job, I think, are better today than they have been in quite some time. That being said, it's attracted a lot of employed people who might not be totally happy with where they're currently working. And so the competition now is not only those who are unemployed, but largely those who are employed. And I think in many cases they are a more attractive candidate than somebody who's been unemployed, especially for any length of time.
Okay. With that as a background, our first question, and this came to me before the program started today. Someone sent it in via email, and I don't know if it's so much a question as it is a rant, but in either case, it's on a subject that I know, certainly from the candidate side of this process, is something that I think a lot of people probably feel as well. So here's what this person says. He says, I, like 1,000 other job seekers, get a call or an email. Please send in the information, and then nothing. Silence forever. I know that they are busy with hundreds of applications, as we job seekers are just as, but we job seekers are just as much a potential client to the recruiter as is the client that's paying you. Without either one of us, you are out of a job. I strongly feel a quick call, an email, just to say the good or the bad or the ugly would help us plan for the future. At least let us know of the status. It says, he says, I've written and revised more resumes over the past year. I've never been fired. I'm a long-term employee with multiple letters of recommendation and kudos, and still, it's like sending off a letter to Santa in hopes of a surprise. It just isn't fair that the communication is only a one-way street. Well, you bring recruiting experience to this. I know you certainly talk to clients on the coaching side who probably that those feelings are reflected there. What sort of comments would you make in terms of people who feel that way?
Well, it's ironic because for those on the call, I run the Boston area networking meeting that ExecuNet runs. So any of you in the Boston area, what is this, June 19th, the meeting, which is held in Waltham, Mass., is going to have a recruiter panel. And I do this a couple of times a year because the issue that that individual raised is one that we hear all the time.
Sure.
And what the panelists are likely to say when that same issue surfaces is that the world of recruiting has changed. Rightly or wrongly, the common decency of just getting back to somebody to acknowledge the fact that they wrote in is almost a vestige of the past. It's almost like hanging up on a cold call that we get at dinner time. That's the equivalent when somebody calls me at dinner time, and more times than not, it's not even an individual, it's a robocall. Right. I just hang up. And that's the equivalent, I think, of what most recruiters do in 2015. And the reason for it is that most are inundated with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes that come from folks who are, in many cases, unqualified for the job to which they're applying. They may think they're qualified, but most of us would disagree with that. I'm not justifying the behavior or the fact that they don't respond, but it's the equivalent of a cold call when they get an unsolicited response to a job posting. It leads me to sort of a broader set of recommendations. Even though ExecuNet has a job board, and we were one of the very first companies to ever have a job board, to me, responding to posted jobs should be on the bottom of the list of things that you do if you're looking for a job, rather than being on the top of the list. Because when you respond to a job that's posted without having any in to that company, the likelihood of getting any kind of a response, no matter how qualified you might be, is next to zero. So if you're looking to change that so that you actually get a response, my strong recommendation would be find somebody in that company, try your darndest to get an introduction to either the hiring manager and or the person in HR who's doing this search, or the external recruiter for that matter, because that's really the only way of assuring that you'll get any kind of human interaction around the job. If you simply respond to job postings and expect to get a response, you're going to be as disappointed and end up ranting the same way that individual did to Dave.
You know, one of the things that's interesting to me is, and for those on the call who aren't aware of this, but we've been in business for 27 years. This is year 27. And it's kind of when you've been around that long, it does give you a little bit of a perspective in terms of how things have changed. And Don's points are certainly very well taken. I will tell you this, that when we first started, and this was pre-internet, by the way, if I had to rank the things that most irritated and frustrated job seekers, this would have been number one on the list, and was number one on the list for quite some period of time. And the fact that it still resonates today, as you can see from the comment that this person sent in, you know, gives you some idea of the impact that it has. That being said, I would certainly underscore what Don's comments. A lot of it has to do with the fact that this is 2015. There's technology involved, the volume. If you ask recruiters, they will tell you what Don has already shared with you in terms of volume and so forth. And the same, by the way, is true on the part of companies. The time was, certainly I came out of a generation where, irrespective of whether it was a search firm or a company, if you sent them a letter, and that's what we did in those days, you got a response, even if it was only a simple acknowledgement. That clearly has kind of gone out of the culture, as Don has already said. And good, bad, or indifferent, it's very important for a candidate to understand that for this reason. This is an emotional roller coaster when you're looking for a job, and if you keep sending stuff off into cyberspace, because that's certainly an easy thing to do, and you're not hearing anything, it is very easy to fall into an emotional place where you begin to think, my God, there must be something really wrong with me. I'm not hearing back from anyone. And that is very unlikely to be the case. It is much more likely to be the case that Don has already, already shared with us. So it's an important thing to know from an emotional stability perspective. Here's a question, Don. This person wants to know, why do employers prefer people who are currently working? I was laid off in March and now feel that I'm at a disadvantage in the job market, and how do I overcome this bias?
You know, a good question. And there was a study done about 1.5 years ago by Northeastern University that showed that there's a true bias, especially the longer somebody is unemployed. And I think the research talked about it being 6 months or longer. It really became problematic. So in an improving market at this point, and still a buyer's market, there's a perception that somebody who's employed is somehow a better candidate than somebody who's unemployed, even though there's an understanding that many folks who are unemployed through no fault of their own. It's not some performance review about how they did on their last job. Companies downsize, companies close, companies change strategy, and people are the victim of that. All that being said, that's the logic. Apparently, the thought process is that if you're currently working, somehow you're more desirable than if you're not working. So what do I recommend then to folks like the person who sent this question in, who's been unemployed since March, April, May, June, 3 months? What I would say is to try to avoid at all costs showing that you're unemployed. Now, how might you do that? Well, if you're getting some sort of a package when you left the company so that they're still paying you some sort of fee, you're still getting your salary 3 months later, I think it's legitimate to still show them as your employer. You can show that you've worked at a company through 2015, because clearly you have, even though you're currently not there. Or what I recommend in many cases is to demonstrate what you're currently doing. So if you're consulting, if you're volunteering, I just got off the phone with somebody who left her employment a number of months ago and is now going to get an additional certification. So she's back in school to get certified one level beyond where she currently is in her career. If you had to leave a job because of an illness in the family, I'm working with somebody who recently attended my meeting in Massachusetts who had a death in his family, or had an illness in his family that resulted in a death. And so there was a gap in terms of the story that was being told with experience. He filled that gap in with the truth, what was going on. My sense is any company that wouldn't accept that explanation and or honor that explanation is a company that I wouldn't want to work for anyway. So filling in gaps, I think, is a very important thing to do, because if there are gaps in your resume, recruiters and hiring managers will fill them in for themselves. And having done this for many, many years before I came to ExecuNet, I will tell you that what I used to fill in was far worse than any truth you could have provided. So don't give the reader that opportunity. Share with them what you're doing. Even if you're not getting paid to do volunteer work, you don't have to tell them that, but you can still list it as a consulting company. And if your name is John Smith, don't put your consulting company as John Smith Consulting, because then it becomes even more obvious that the consulting company is simply a gap filler. So there are some suggestions that hopefully help, but why this is the way people think, I'm really not sure. But in a buyer's market, I have no control over that, and neither do you.
A couple of quick comments, and again, reflecting on the 27 years here. While it is absolutely true that the bias, and there are lots and lots of them that any of us on this call could name that go well beyond employed versus unemployed, but a bias is a bias. And the one with reference to being employed versus not employed, does it still exist? The answer is yes, it absolutely does. However, I will tell you that at least in my observation, since founding ExecuNet, it is much less today than it was 20 years ago. And I could go into, there are a number of reasons why that is, I would suggest, but I will just tell you that it is certainly less. That doesn't change the fact that it doesn't exist. It does. And my comment with regard to biases, be it unemployed versus employed or anything else, is that they're on a spectrum in this world. And at one end of the spectrum are people whose minds you are never going to change no matter what. And on the other end are people whose minds you don't have to worry about changing. And the rest of us are probably somewhere in the middle. And you kind of go on from there. So that I could say more about it, but I think I'll just leave it there for the moment. Kind of a follow-on to that, Don, comes, and this person says, so I pay you guys a monthly fee to have full access to your posted positions, and Don just said that these are worthless. I guess I should not pay to belong anymore. Don, before you jump in on that, let me just say one thing here about posted positions. I know about posted jobs. The jobs that are posted, certainly at least the ones that are posted here, tend to be positions that are very difficult for the firm to fill. And that doesn't mean that members here who respond to posted positions don't end up with interviews and offers, because many of them do, and many of them don't, for all the reasons that John has already alluded to. But the point is that's the tip of the iceberg. In this day and age, the recruiters would much prefer, and underscore much prefer, to be looking at your profile and or your resume or other marketing materials, and then decide who they want to reach out to relative to whatever openings they have. It is a very trap to fall into these days, with technology being what it is, to sit behind a keyboard, respond to posted job openings. The truth of the matter is that the percentage of people who end up responding to job postings is really pretty low, and particularly true if you're dealing at the levels that we do here at ExecuNet, where we're talking about C-level kinds of activities. So there are kind of 4 ways that people make job changes in this world that I know of. You can answer an ad, i.e. a posting. You can do some sort of a direct mail campaign. You can be recruited. A recruiter actually finds you somewhere and reaches out to you, or you can get there through networking. Over the years, I would say on average, at least 70% of the people in this network, when they make a change, it's through some kind of a linkage process. Call it networking, call it what you will. So to the person who, where you think that your monthly fee is going down the tubes because postings are worthless, they're not worthless. They're just, they're only one of 4 ways that people actually make changes, and as long as they're there, they're real. I would end up by saying it this way, that when you think about joining an organization like this one where you do pay a fee, I would think of yourself as a member of a team, and we're the coach. We try to teach and show people how to play the game and provide the resources to help the players execute their game plan. In other words, we all know that the what is, and this is to win. So we try to coach our members in terms of how, and so that when it becomes game time, that you as the player are in a much better position to execute the plays in the game that can help you get to the point of winning. Don, your comments?
Yeah, I would just say that postings certainly aren't worthless. What I think I said earlier was that it wouldn't be my primary,
right,
and in many cases when I talk to folks, my only way of finding a new job. You know, as you said, Dave, it's easy to sit at home in your pajamas
right,
and respond to jobs and feel like, oh, I'm doing a good job trying to find a new job because I just responded to 300 postings today. Well, I'd much rather that you went out and had lunch with somebody that has a strong network and can help you make introductions than apply to 300 job postings. I often find as well that spouses have an influence here, because when they say to you, what did you do today to find a new job? And you say, well, I responded to 300 job postings, somehow that seems to work. If you said, oh, I went to lunch with a friend who has a broad network, that might not work as well. So folks are motivated to do one thing or the other by a variety of sources. I think one needs to have a very, one needs to have both a push strategy and a pull strategy to market themselves. And any marketing people on the call will know that a push strategy are things that you're doing to try to get folks interested in you. And so it could be responding to postings. It could be going to networking meetings. It could be getting a resume review so that you find out whether or not your current resume is working for you or not. It could be going to one of the ExecuNet meetings that we hold in 30 cities around the country. These are all things where you're taking the initiative. But I also know that being found, your pull strategy, is also critically important. And you need to understand what it's going to take for your resume or your ExecuNet profile or your LinkedIn profile to make you easily found by people who have jobs that would be perfect for you if only they could find you. And it's not an either or. You need to be doing both of these things and doing it well. So if I were recommending an approach, first thing would be to network and to do networking well. Second thing would probably be to make sure that all of your collateral is world-class. This is your marketing material. You want to be able to stand out from your competition. Many of you, I just had a call an hour ago with somebody who had been employed for 14 years, and when you looked at her resume, you knew that she hadn't done a resume in 14 years because it looked like one that would have worked in the year 2001, but certainly isn't going to get her any kind of notice in 2015. So there are things that you can do to help yourself. You need to be proactive. You need to have a push strategy as well as a pull strategy. Applying to jobs, it would be part of that push strategy, but wherever possible, especially if the employer is listed in the job posting, rather than simply send your stuff in like everyone else. Try to find somebody in that company who can make an introduction for you to get you to the top of the pile of resumes rather than where you might otherwise fall.
Fair enough. Thanks, Don. And while we're on this subject, particularly for those of you who are new members, or if you haven't had a chance to kind of really take a look at some of the things that Don has already talked about, Kim, let's put up the slide about when people when you log in, and just so I can just take a moment to remind you all here. When you log into the network, whether you're a paid member here or whether or not you're a basic member, if you look at the icon that comes up at the top of the screen that says welcome and it has your name on it, and you click on it, there's a drop-down menu there, and you can see very quickly that there are 6 areas there that allow you to manage pretty much anything with regard to your membership. I would urge you, if you haven't recently, is to go into your account and do at least 3 things to start with, one of which Don has already talked about with reference to marketing materials and your resume and so forth. Again, whether you're a basic member here, you have the opportunity to get your reviewed. It's complimentary, and you can see the link to do that right there in the upper right. Also, we've already talked about profiles and how important they are. You can see where that section is, and you want to make sure that that really represents you at the way you want to be represented. And the third thing that I've pointed out here has to do with the network. There's a functionality for members to find you and vice versa, and if you're not familiar with it, you certainly ought to make sure that you are. Lastly, and some people miss this when they're doing their profile, if you go down, there's an area called down at the as you get down into your profile area, down on the left-hand side, called More About Me. A lot of people miss it, but it gives you a terrific opportunity in your own words for anybody looking at your profile, whether it's a recruiter or a fellow member, to get a heck better sense of you as a person, as opposed to simply an executive who had X number of years experience in Y industry. So I think it's kind of worth the time to do that. So if you haven't had a chance to revisit some of those things, I would strongly urge you to do so. Okay, now let's run up here to this question. This person says, I have 3 phone interviews this afternoon. Awesome. Should I connect with the interviewers via LinkedIn prior to the calls, or is it better to wait until afterwards? Don, your thoughts on that?
Well, if I had an interview, I would be on LinkedIn immediately to find out as much as I could about the person with whom I'm going to be talking. Mm-hmm. And LinkedIn would only be one place that I might look. I'd Google them. I'd want to find out as much about clearly the company, but even more so the individual, because the best interview is one that's a conversation. And the best way of making it a conversation is to know as much as possible about the company, about the job, about the person with whom you're speaking, because you're looking for links, you're looking for connect points, you're looking for ways of being able to make this into a conversation. So the actual linking with the individual can take place before or after, but I would certainly do my research prior to any interview. It's preparation for those of you who either have made your living selling either yourself or your employer. I would suggest that if you were good at what you do, you never go on a call without preparing. Well, an interview to me is a sales call. You should never go on an interview without preparing. So I would certainly look at the profile of the person who's going to interview me. I might send them an invitation at that point to link before the interview, or after the interview, I might send them a thank you and do it on LinkedIn and invite them to link with me as well. But do prepare and do know as much about this situation, this opportunity, this job, this company, this individual as you can before any interview.
Fair enough. This person says, I recently chose to resign my position with good recommendations, relationships, and no severance because the company decided not to invest in the division I was hired to transform. Many have indicated it is a position of strength to say that I've set my own direction, but because it's unusual, I find it difficult to get past suspicions, even though I encourage them to call my previous supervisor and colleagues. Do you have any advice?
Set my own direction. You know, that would be a red flag for me. It just would. As much, and Dave could attest to this, as independent as I am, and as much as I have a need to set my own direction, I think if somebody led with that, it would set up a red flag for me in terms of what kind of employee this person might turn out to be. It's one thing to be entrepreneurial, it's one thing to be independent, but you know, if you end up leaving your job because there was a misalignment in terms of how much change the organization was willing to undertake versus what you thought you were signing up for, and then either in writing or in the conversation, you talk about the need to set one's own direction. This is just one of those watch outs. To me, it would be a loaded kind of a statement. And, you know, let me just back up for a second. If I got 500 resumes in for a particular job posting, the first thing I'm going to do is to cull the pile. First of all, I'm not going to look at I'm not going to look at 500. I'd probably only look at, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 50. So first and foremost, you need to make sure you're at the top of the pile versus in the middle of the pile versus at the bottom of the pile. And you do that through keyword optimization, number one. Number two, okay, so now I start reviewing these resumes. How much time am I going to give when I look at a resume? Well, our research says 10 seconds or less, which means that the top part of the first page, where you have your name, where you have your contact information, where you have your value proposition, where you show results, where you show keywords or competencies, that needs to be compelling. Because if you don't grab my attention there, I'm not going to page down to see what else you have to say. So you have to capture my attention right at the very, very top. And my priority in looking at all these resumes is to get down to, what, 2, 3, 4, 6 that I might be interested in actually speaking to. So the priority is going to be to cull the pile and look for any reason to eliminate somebody from that pile. Typos, just the overall look and feel, no margins. A lot of people, in order to squeeze it into 2 pages, it goes way down to the bottom of the page and there are no margins and it looks terrible. I mean, there's a whole list of things. Using words that are so generic at this point, or using terms like seasoned professional, which either means you rub garlic in your skin each morning or that you're an old person. So you don't want to give them any reason to eliminate you on first blush. And if I said I need to set my own direction somewhere early in the resume, I think many readers would immediately discard that person from consideration. Same thing is if I open my interview by saying, I need you to know in the spirit of full disclosure that I need to set my own direction. Well, my answer would be, then go start your own company and leave us alone. So you just need to be careful about using terminology that is somehow going to be incendiary and might get you immediately eliminated from consideration.
Great, thanks, Don. This person wants to know, what are our thoughts on targeting companies who serve your primary target companies? In other words, sell products or services to the companies that are on your
yes.
primary list. Whether that means to have a conversation, to learn what's going on inside the primary target companies, or perhaps to look to get hired by these companies who serve your main targets, and perhaps the professional might like this new periphery opportunity or leverage it to get into the primary companies that they had in mind in the first place.
We have a questionnaire that we use with one of ExecuNet services, where we specifically ask for the names of suppliers to your last employer, as well as customers of your last employer, as well as competitors of your last employer. Why? I think because each of those categories, suppliers, customers, and competitors, offers you a networking opportunity. I want to talk to folks who have been my suppliers because they know the marketplace and they know our competition and they know other openings within the industry, and they may be able to make a referral. The same thing with competitors. I want to know who the competitors are because competitors always like to hire somebody from their competitors because they think that those people understand the job in the industry and probably have a Rolodex of folks. So yes, I think it pays to talk with people who supply the company you're looking to go to work for, or supply the company you're just left, as well as customers, as well as competitors. Those would be three categories I would look at to try to find other opportunities closely aligned with what you previously were doing. And this is important because there are folks who come to us, and I talk with them constantly, and they'll say, you know, I've been a brain surgeon for the last 20 years, but I think I'd like to try my hand at becoming a chef. What are the chances of getting hired, you know, in a premier restaurant with the resume I have? And I say, well, you know, I know you've got good knife skills if you've been a brain surgeon, but it may not translate easily, you know, to becoming a chef. In this economy, again, with lots of people, a buyer's market, lots of candidates out there, changing careers is challenging. I think the only way that I've seen folks do it and do it easily is with somebody who will refer you in and be able to explain why they think you would be successful making this change. And so, you know, I would just be very, very careful in what I'm doing here. I think you stand a far greater chance of getting employed in the same industry, in the same role that you were doing. Again, that's why I said talking to suppliers and customers and competitors is a pretty good place to start in terms of looking for places to network. And one other factor here, if I go to suppliers of mine and say, you know, I'm leaving my job or I've just left my job, they want to make sure I land successfully because hopefully I can bring them into wherever I land next. If I've been a good customer of theirs in the past, they have a vested interest in making sure I land successfully and hoping then that I'll bring them in wherever I go. And so, yeah, those are really good sources of people to be talking to if you're looking to network.
Fair enough. This person says, can ExecuNet refer a candidate, ExecuNet member with a profile, directly to a company listed on ExecuNet, following on what Don recommended? The answer is we have an area for recruiting solutions. In other words, the recruiters who utilize this network and can and frequently will ask the folks in the recruiting solutions area to help them get in touch with members that they want to reach out to that they have found in the database. In fact, one of the things that happens is that again, when you log in, there's an area there for messages, and a lot of members don't, they don't even know that that it's there, and recruiters will reach out to them directly, and they don't see the messages. So frequently they will ask us to make sure that we can reach out to that member and say that they want to talk to that person. So in that sense, yes, we do refer people in that fashion when the recruiters ask us to.
And let me just add to that
yep.
More and more recruiters are telling us that rather than wanting to post a job, they would much prefer to just look at the profiles and the resumes that are posted on our site, and the explanation for that is very simple. That way they control who they get to talk to rather than being inundated by folks and then disappointing them by not, sending them a rejection notice. So if you're a recruiter, you would much rather have control of who you get to look at and talk to than people just responding to an ad that gets posted. And so more and more recruiters are going about it that way than the way recruiters did it in the past in terms of posting a job and hoping qualified people would respond.
Yep. And the fact that they ask us to do this, by the way, and is another reason why it's so critical to have your profile completed, because to follow up on what I said before, they would much prefer to find people that way than to be inundated with responses to a posting. Let's see here. When is ExecuNet going to start having meetings and/or networking events in Texas, Dallas, Houston? Don, you want to comment on that?
Yes, I do, because what's funny is that I've been interviewing. As a matter of fact, she was on my call today. I'm interviewing someone who runs a recruiting firm in the Dallas area. She was literally on the call I had at 11 o'clock this morning, listening in as I was doing a resume review with an ExecuNet member. And I'm hopeful that she will join my team in the not too distant future, because I know that we have gaps in Texas and I'm looking to fill them, but only with somebody that is closely aligned with how we do business, and I think she is, and that could provide additional value, which as a recruiter, I think she can. So hopefully sooner rather than later, watch this space. I understand there's a void in Texas when it comes to having meetings, and hopefully I can start with one in Dallas within the next couple of months.
Well, we also, so it'd be great. And this is kind of also a meeting-related question, but on the flip side of it. This person says, I belong to ExecuNet. However, in my area of the country, we don't have any networking events, so how can we get something going in this area? Well, Don, kind of has alluded to we just don't set up meetings willy-nilly. They've got to really align with kind of what we do. But there obviously are going to be parts of the country where you aren't going to be able to do it just simply because of where, it's a smaller market, as they say, or a smaller city where it's not sort of feasible at this point. However, that doesn't mean that you can't at least identify certainly ExecuNet people who live in that area and kind of build your network that way. And as I alluded to earlier in the call, there's a functionality available to you as a member, at least a platinum member, where you can identify folks who live within a reasonable shot of your particular zip code.
And one
Don,
of the nice things, Dave, one of the nice things about the ExecuNet site, in contrast, for example, to LinkedIn, is that you're able to communicate with folks, other folks in the network, without having to be a quote-unquote first-level connection of theirs or pay extra in order to communicate with somebody who's a second or third-level connection. So it's very likely that you can find other folks in your geography and reach out to them and begin networking with them, even though there may not be a meeting going on where you live.
Right. This person wondered what you thought about the perception, because we started out today's call talking about employed versus unemployed. This is kind of a tangent to that, and that is that wants to know what the perception is of people who are working, but it's clear that they are working in a position that's well below their capabilities, so that they've accepted a job or in a job at that, where they're trying to say, well, I'm employed,
right.
but yet it's. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a catch-22. It really is, because on the one hand, those folks who are not independently wealthy need to take jobs to pay the bills and get out of the house. So that's a critical thing to do. Sometimes that means taking a job below where you previously were. In so doing, you create some dissonance on the part of your next potential employer, who wonders why you did what you did. Mm-hmm. And so I would be, again, as transparent as I could possibly be, if and when the question arose, to say, look, I took that job because I had bills to pay and a family to feed. Now that the market has improved, I'm looking to move back into a role that's more commensurate with where I was before I took this role. Mm-hmm. It creates another area that requires an explanation. It won't make your search process any easier for sure. But it is what it is, and you just need to find ways of explaining it that most rational people will understand and accept. And again, if somebody doesn't understand that you had bills to pay and it was a down economy and this job was available, then it's probably not the kind of company you'd want to work for anyway.
Fair enough. And we were just talking about the networking where there may not be a meeting locally enough. Kim, who's kind of running the Operation Central for today's call, as she always does, did a live search for that member who raised the question and sent him a note saying that she found over 500 members who were located within 50 miles of that person's zip code. Wow. And so
where was the zip code, Dave? Do you know?
I don't know. Kim looked him up, and
it was Northern California.
Okay. Northern California.
Oh yeah. We used to have a meeting there.
That's
right. Another area where I would love to have a meeting. I'm constantly looking at the map and trying to find people in those geographies that I know that would draw a crowd if we had a meeting there. And Texas and Northern California are very, very high up on my list. And hopefully sooner rather than later, you'll see that we put a meeting into those areas.
Okay. This person wants to know what are the options if an ad is run and it's blind, as can often happen these days. What suggestions might you have in responding to a blind ad that might help you stand out?
Wow. Well, I think the answer to that question has nothing to do with whether it's blind or not. The only caveat to that is if I knew the company, I would try to get an introduction. If it's blind, clearly I can't. But there are times that even a blind ad, sounds like a blind squirrel, but even a blind ad, you can figure out who the company is by sometimes looking at the area code, sometimes looking at the description of the job. You can get a sense of who the company is, which will then allow you to try to network into it. Anytime you're applying, there are some rules of thumb that I think go across whether you know the company or not. One is that if they have specific requirements, that you follow them. If they say you need to have a cover letter, then you have to have a cover letter. Whether you believe cover letters are important or not is irrelevant. If they say in your cover letter, you need to clearly describe how you meet the following criteria, then I would have two columns. One column would have the criteria they're looking to fill, and the second column would have the ways I would specifically address those or meet those. Even if they're in my resume, I'd repeat them there. So you just need to make sure you follow the rules in terms of blind ads. And then I would add and maybe repeat something I said earlier. This is a marketing process. You're marketing yourself when you apply. It's no different than getting an RFP from some company saying, here are the requirements for this large piece of business. Please respond and make sure you address the following. It's no different than responding to an RFP if you were in business development or sales or whatever. Now the question is, how do you make it stand out? Well, if you sent in a response to the RFP that was laden with typos and misspellings and poor punctuation and whatever, I would dismiss you immediately. And most executives I talk to say, yeah, I do the same thing. Whenever I would get a resume with typos in it, I'd say this is not the person for me. So you need to make sure that whatever you're submitting is perfect. Then I would take it one level above. You need to make it distinguishable. You need to make it stand out. You need to make the collateral impressive, contemporary. If it looks like the resume you were taught to write by the Career Center when you graduated from college 35 years ago, it's probably not going to help you. I have done, I don't know, Dave, half a dozen or more webinars on this topic. They're on the site. There are examples posted about how to do a compelling resume. And even beyond that, because I think you need additional collateral to use when you go for your interview. And if you're going to go to a networking meeting, once we have one in Dallas or Northern California, I think there's another piece of collateral you could use in order to stand out at a networking meeting. You need to continually market yourself so that you're differentiated from all the other highly qualified candidates against whom you're competing. Only one of you is going to get the job. Only a handful of you are going to get in the door in the first place. You want to be one of those people. Will your existing resume help you to stand out? Because if it doesn't, and that's what you're submitting, whether it's a blind ad or not, once they look at you through that particular document, is that going to help you or hinder you? Are you going to have results of what you've accomplished over your career? Will you have the keywords that will help them to find you? Because most of these job postings are done through an applicant tracking system. And so within the job spec itself, there are keywords embedded. And unless you use those keywords in your documents, they're not going to find you. Or if they do, you may end up being 278 out of 300 resumes they receive. Remember, they're only going to look at the first couple of pages, 10 to a page. So maybe the top 30 or 40. You need not only to be in the pile, you need to be at the top of the pile. And these are all things that if you don't know how to do it, you could learn how to do it. We provide coaching in all of these areas. We can teach you, coach you, to do this more effectively. It's one of the services we provide. It happens to be for a fee, but I think it's an investment that some of you probably should make because it's going to help you land more quickly and more successfully. And, you know, although I never try to sell what we do on these calls, it's clear that some of you could use more in-depth consultation, more in-depth coaching. And we do provide that in case you didn't know it.
Fair enough. Thanks, Don. And as always happens on these calls, we run out of time long before we run out of questions. And that certainly is the case today as well. But hopefully people had some good takeaways from the things we were able to cover. As we close up things for this afternoon, Don, is there anything you'd like to say to the group in closing?
I wish you all well in this process, and I think things have improved in the market, so I think that's good for you. It still is very, 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 very competitive. Hopefully, some of what Dave and I shared with you today will help you improve your chances. And have a great weekend.
Don, thanks again as always. Kim, thank you as always for your help as well.
Oh, Dave, you forgot to mention that they should fill out the evaluation.
Oh, they'll get that automatically after the call. But yes, we certainly could, want to get your feedback, and you'll have the opportunity to do that as soon as we sign off. So please do take a moment to do it because we read it and we react to it as well. So with that, we wish everyone a great weekend. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you on other calls in the future. Thanks, everyone.